Hey, welcome back to Peer Reviewed Revolution, the project where I come to the internet as a peer to discuss how we can turn our revolutionary thoughts into action. I'm Cecil, and this is the first official part of Unpacking White Supremacy Culture on the left. Today, we begin with perfectionism, either-or thinking, and objectivity. I started here because these are the characteristics I am most familiar with. It feels like a nice, broad jumping off point to get into how we interact with the rest of the characteristics, and the more that I've studied, the truer it seemed. Someone asked me what my process is for this series, so I thought I'd share before we get into it. I spent about a month studying the characteristics of white supremacy culture on a deeper level, reading the PDF, writing out the bullet points to internalize them, asking peers, and organizing in educational spaces when I felt stuck. Then I journaled about each one, a sort of rough draft for what would become these posts. And a couple of years after having them on the internet, we are now going back with fresh eyes and thoughts. The outline for this post is perfectionism, what it is, how it shows up in myself and antidotes applied, how it shows up in society, antidotes applied, how it shows up in movements, antidotes applied, and then the same for either-or thinking and objectivity, and then a conclusion where we will tie everything together. Including the antidotes is a vital step, and as a matter of fact, leads us right into perfectionism. It's essential to not only include what goes wrong, but what can be done to do better. Perfectionism is more than just expecting everything to be perfect. It's focusing on what's wrong without being able to identify things that are right. It's conflating a person making a mistake or doing something wrong with being a mistake and being wrong. And in noticing all that's wrong, there's not much time or energy put into how to make things right or better. It also shows up as talking to others about a person or their work being subpar rather than talking directly to that person, ergo why I will not be drawing on any specific individual examples throughout this series. And when it's not pointing out what's wrong, it's failure to appreciate the work everyone is doing, instead only giving credit to those who would get the most credit anyways. Perfectionism has been a long-time personal struggle. Maybe it's growing up a gifted kid, maybe it's something about the autism or the OCD, but perfectionism starts within. And as Tony Cade Bambara said, we are about building a nation. The inner nation needs building too. When you have a standard for yourself, it's easy to begin projecting that onto others. Impatience with how they do things, frustration when the group project isn't going the way you wanted. It begins with the acknowledgement that I am working hard every day, and I will make mistakes while working hard. My therapist tells me often all data is good data, which is to say, even when things go quote-unquote wrong or not according to plan, there is still something to be gained from the experience. And very rarely does everything go wrong. For myself, the things that go wrong often boil down to misjudging how long a task will take, or disability flaring up and stopping me from doing all that I set out to do. As I do the work to get better at time management and realistic expectations for my body, I find myself frustrated when working with someone else who is not as far along in figuring out the timing of everything. Hence the projection. It is easy to get frustrated with other people for making mistakes that you yourself have been learning from, especially the ones you still kick yourself over making sometimes. Being patient with yourself lays the groundwork to be patient with others. Sure, I've spent 5 years religiously studying how long each of the tasks I do every day will take, but I'm also self-employed. I have the time to give myself that space. Not everyone has that luxury, and they will take longer sometimes. When working with someone who has a harder time with time management than I do, it's best to be constructive and not silently grow in frustration throughout the process. Systemically, perfectionism is like end-of-year performance reviews where toxic bosses say, "You surpassed our expectations," which was our expectation. So, doing things well in work and school, it's what's expected of you by default. So it's more common to receive criticism of doing something poorly than appreciation when you do well. Doing well is what you're supposed to do. We're not always given opportunities to understand why what we did was wrong or opportunities to fix it. You fail a test and that's that. Your boss is disappointed with your drop in productivity with no ideas on why that may be or how to work together to fix it. For school, one solution I've seen put into practice are open book test corrections. Not just retakes, once again trying to recall everything from memory, but being able to go through your own test, see what was marked wrong, and go through the notes to find why it was wrong. That's how my AP Bio teacher was in high school. If we got things wrong on a test, he let us correct it and explain why the new answer was correct and where we went wrong with the previous one. And no one was singled out, no one had to come after class or during lunch to do that alone. After a test, every single one of us had that next class period to go through our test and correct anything wrong, whether you got one question wrong or 15. We were actually learning, and there was so much less pressure on test days. And no, people didn't bullshit the test just because they knew there'd be a chance to correct it. We all still did our best because, the less you had to work on test corrections, the more time we had to do other stuff. Going into the final for that class, I felt confident because I knew the material. Our experiences in the education system often lay the groundwork for punitive justice. Do things perfectly or face consequences, no real in between. Giving opportunities to truly learn the material, correct mistakes, and be rewarded for the ability to learn and improve could help lay the foundation of restorative justice. And from there, we get into building a better working culture. Mistakes can still lead to positive results. In reviews and evaluations, it should be standard to speak on what was done well before offering criticism. And with that criticism should be an inquisitive attitude and not a punishing one. If someone has been suddenly doing worse at their work, there's likely something going on that they might need support or assistance with. And if there's only one person at the whole company who knows how to do certain tasks and they have to work ridiculous amounts of overtime just to get all of those tasks done, maybe there needs to be some training involved so that others can help take the load off. We are brought up in this culture that expects perfection at the first try and punishes us if we fail to perform it. Many of us are terrified of making mistakes. So terrified that it traps us in an action, like a trauma response. And so we bring that into our movements. There's this deep inner fear that you will not be perfect. You're not the one to speak on something because if you get something wrong, you will be exposed as a flawed human being. And that energy doesn't stay internalized. It goes out into the world and into our expectations of others in the same fight as us. Someone makes a mistake or two and they're effectively quote-unquote canceled out of the movement. Not to be confused with known grifters or those who repeatedly spread misinformation and do harm to the communities they claim to advocate for. Often the people doing the quote-unquote canceling have no constructive feedback and are faceless, nameless accounts that are too afraid to take the risk of being wrong in public themselves. There is little patience for people who are new to activism and are letting their newness happen in public. Again, I'm not talking about people who actively, repeatedly cause harm. I'm talking about people who bring something good and helpful to the table and make a few stumbles along the way. Their stumbles are framed as them being bad activists and bad faith actors instead of new activists who need guidance. Every single one of us was new to revolutionary work at some point, and many of us still are. People are being radicalized every day in the face of global injustices, genocides, the rise of fascism, and the general discontent with late-stage capitalism. Yes, the stakes are high, but we won't achieve our goals any faster just because we attack those who are fighting the same fight as us. And for those who have a lot of criticism to give to the ones speaking out, but haven't done any speaking out for themselves, unpack that. Unpack the fear that is ultimately about yourself not being good enough. Give grace to yourself, have the courage to be wrong in public, and give that grace to others. And organizers build your movements and initiatives to include grace for mistakes and expectations for how to address mistakes. This philosophy is the whole reason I am posting this series, instead of hiding it away in my journal. Facing my own internalized perfectionism head on, putting my thoughts out there to collaborate with others who may have been thinking about similar things in different ways, and accepting that my interpretation might be wrong, that I may be corrected, that I still have much to learn, because we all still have much to learn. Even after I finish my edits and upload the audio formats of these posts, I will continue learning. I will disagree with myself in the future sometimes. That's the nature of being alive. Now, either or thinking. Things are good or bad. People are with us or against us. Something is right or wrong, etc. No room is left for nuance or the idea that sometimes things are both and. It's oversimplifying the complex, creating a sense of urgency, and creating false dichotomies. This ties back into perfectionism. When we fail to acknowledge the good alongside the bad, it makes things out to be all good or all bad. One of the hardest things for me to truly learn and understand growing up was intersectionality. I think a lot of white people may be familiar with this. When you're told your existence in a white body gives you privilege, there's a common misunderstanding that this means your life is easy. You can be marginalized in other ways. Queerness, misogyny, affected genders, disability, poverty, and your struggles will never be a result of being white. A more current struggle for myself is figuring out at what point I actually will disengage from others working towards the same goal as me. The idea of you're either with us or against us only holds true to certain points. But if there is an anarcho-communist with a collective liberation peer who is a democratic socialist, they'll probably disagree on a few things with the world they're trying to build. Does this mean they are against each other, or does it mean they are two unique people bringing different ideas to the table? There's some questions I ask myself to get past the we agree or we disagree but we cannot do both mindset. For example, is this person going about something in a way that is actually harmful, or is it just not the way I would do it? Is this person upholding supremacist culture, or are they a flawed human being who made a human error that they are actually learning from? How much does their impact negate their intention? Things are rarely as simple as, this is a bad person I disagree with on everything, and this is a good person I agree with on everything. Often we exist in the middle. This is a person. Sometimes we disagree and sometimes we agree. Systemically, who does it benefit if we're willing to write off everyone in our community after one disagreement? A poll conducted in 2022 showed that over 40% of Americans think there's at least a chance of a civil war in the next decade. I think that a lot of times we consider Trump's first election to be the moment the gap between quote-unquote conservative and quote-unquote liberal Americans began to widen. I would argue that Trump's first election was a result of the widening that had already begun, and the farther we get from each other, the more steadfast MAGA Republicans and vote blue no matter who Democrats think that they must vote for their party in the two-party system. Either or thinking creates exactly this: conflict and a sense of urgency, making people feel as though they can only do this or that with no time or encouragement to consider alternatives, especially if those alternatives are harder to do. Who does this benefit? The main two political parties. Despite creating so much division between voters, if we've learned anything from the genocide in Gaza, it is that both of our major political parties, 1, do not care about their constituents' opinions, and 2, work together to maintain Western hegemony and American imperialism, which are both based in, that's right folks, white supremacy culture. Do you know how bummed out I am to have not had to revise anything in that paragraph 2 years later? Because, damn. However, They have convinced their voter bases that the boogeyman other party will single-handedly ruin the entire country if they gain power. It's a very effective thing to keep people loyal so that they never consider that maybe both parties are working together towards fascism, just at different speeds. My personal ideal world is one where political parties don't even exist. I think that's an easy way to campaign, piggybacking on an established platform, but there's so much range in policy and ideals between party members. I feel like each person running for office should have to just run as a person with a platform. However, I concede that for most people, it's probably good enough to just create a system that encourages more than two parties to exist and thrive. Some other ways either-or thinking shows up systematically, saying people can only be male or female, gay or straight, racial divisions that lean mostly black or white, so on and so forth. We've been conditioned to see the world in dichotomies when reality is so often spectral. And so we carry these values into movements. People who will vote blue no matter who are automatically labeled centrist neoliberals. People who refuse to vote for Harris, quote-unquote, let Trump win. The court of public opinion is fickle, and the attention span of social media is short. People with a long history of harmful behavior wiggle into favor because they say a few of the right things. People who have done so much good for their communities are harassed for not doing enough on the issues that's currently at the height of the news cycle. Sometimes harmful public figures will have a good thing to say or two. They could genuinely mean it, and they could be trying to co-opt a liberation movement to gain social capital, and sometimes helpful people will cause harm. We cannot write off sincere apologies just because they made a human error, especially an error that they take accountability for and correct. Believe marginalized people when they tell you that a public figure has a habit of co-opting and appropriating social movements. Give grace to those who have proven themselves willing to do the work and improve. Give grace to yourself. You are still learning. If you are persistent in learning from your mistakes, if you are courageous enough to make mistakes, you are doing okay. You are human. Give yourself grace. Objectivity is the belief that there's even such a thing as being objective, that emotions are inherently irrational and destructive, that feelings should have no role in decision-making. It's impatience and frustration with anyone who thinks in a way that doesn't seem logical to those in power. As an autistic person with that strong sense of justice, I do often catch myself thinking that my opinions and values are objective. When consuming media, I consider my interpretation to be the most correct sometimes, even as someone who has always tried to value how everyone experiences media differently. Sometimes I think my analysis is technical enough that it surpasses my emotional involvement. It does not. In more serious matters, I think basic all humans deserve rights on the basis of being humans may be a good objectively moral stance. But what about the more nuanced pieces of the human tapestry? Is it objective to consider a fetus not a baby until it is born? Does it matter when the moral stance is that pregnant people should have the choice whether or not to carry a pregnancy to term? For some people, it will be a perfectly moral decision to have an abortion. Some others will never want one or get one because it isn't objective. The emphasis here is on the right to choose what is the right decision for you and your body, not to enforce your morals on someone else. So the result is safe, legal abortions available to anyone who needs one, because with this option, no one is forced to and no one is forced not to. Does this make sense? It's a sensitive subject, but I had the clearest line of thought with this example. I have gone from being raised to believe that abortion is always bad, to sometimes bad, to now believing I think God knows if a fetus is going to be aborted or not, so the whole I knew you in your mother's womb argument falls flat to me. And if for some reason my asexual, touch-averse body became pregnant, I would want an abortion. That's not a stress I could ever imagine putting my body through. And there are others who know they couldn't live with themselves or the guilt if they ever had an abortion, so they would never choose to unless it was absolutely life-savingly necessary. Neither of us are objectively right. We are making the right choices for ourselves based on our experiences and knowledge of ourselves. The concept of objective truth and objective interpretation, like most things, I think starts with school. In English and language classes, for example, there's usually a vibe teachers want you to get from the reading. They teach you how to interpret the text so that in essays and on tests you get it right. Except in a class of 20 plus students, there's going to be 20 plus interpretations. Some will be more similar to each other than others, but everyone is bringing their own unique lens to the story. For probably the first 9 grades, I've believed that ultimately the English teachers knew best, so I tried to follow the interpretation they were leading me to. But then in grade 10, we read The Catcher in the Rye, and something changed. Trigger warning for mention of inappropriate behavior from an adult towards a teenager in the book. There's this scene where, I can't remember if it was a teacher or just a trusted adult, but either way, an adult touches Holden Caulfield's, I think his leg. It's very clearly, to me, uncomfortable, inappropriate, and Holden mentions this sort of thing is almost normal. It's been over 8 years, forgive me if I mix up any details. Our teacher said that this was supposed to be a comforting gesture, and not an obviously creepy gesture. And that was when I realized that English teachers do not all magically know best. After that, I got bold and got in trouble for it. Points deducted, corrections, and red pen. I stuck to my guns. They can read it how they want, but I wasn't changing my interpretation for them. The motive seems to be rooted in a few things. Keeping us literate in a way that the system benefits from, keeping us from questioning authority figures and teaching us to assume they know best, and pushing the idea that there is an objective truth and objective opinion, and it is held by those in authority, because those in authority know how to separate their feelings from their interpretations. No, they do not. The undoing of this, then, should start in school as well. Teachers who are able, let your students challenge you. As long as what they're saying is based on what's in the text, and they can back it up, consider it a valid view. Encourage them to think with their own lenses. Systemically, we see it a lot with our representatives. It benefits them greatly if we, their constituents, believe that when they ignore our input, it's just because they're trying to do what's objectively best for us. We just don't have all the information. Surely they know something we don't. The idea that those in power somehow possess the unique ability to think without emotion, to act without an ulterior motive. But they do not think objectively. They are not unbiased, and it is observable. While public opinion does not get reflected in government decisions, lobbies and PACs sure do. In this system, those in power are motivated by pushing the stance that will make them the most money, not by what is objective or true to their voters. As the world crumbles and we build a new one, we have to continuously challenge authority, challenge elected officials, challenge our teachers. Don't allow authoritative leadership to follow us into the new world. Decisions should be made democratically by the masses. Even if the new system still has representatives, they should have a duty to reflect what their constituents are asking of them. If they are serially voting against their constituents' wishes, then they should be removed or deemed ineligible to rerun. And speaking of world building, this takes us into movements. How often do we find our solutions, our tactics, to be the objective best way to achieve goals? Some people think it's an objective reality that we need a general strike in order to achieve revolution. Some people think it's an objective reality that a general strike will never work. Some people think it's an objective reality that a revolution will require violence. Some people think it's an objective reality that nothing we do will mean anything. But the truth is, none of us know what tactics will work and what will be most successful. All we can do is try. Everyone will use the tool they are capable of using, and there's no objective best tool. Instead of shooting down each other's ideas all the time, we should focus instead on how each idea will work together. Everyone has experiences that affect their ideas and understandings. Everyone has emotions that influence their decisions. This includes you. This includes me. Assume everybody has a valid point, and your job is to understand what that point is. That's the closing antidote for objectivity in the PDF, and I think it's right. We have to understand where people are coming from if we're ever going to work successfully in a collective. In conclusion, the connection between the three is that we are taught to believe things are either factual or emotional, and the goal is to be objective. Perfection can only be obtained through objective correctness. In reality, there is no true perfection, and most things are not as dichotomous as we were taught. Because of this, there is no objective reality or objective perfection. When we realize that we are not objective because our emotions definitely influence us, we punish ourselves and try to ignore our emotional input. When we see others react emotionally, we respond to them how we respond to ourselves, especially if the emotional reaction is imperfect, is paired with a mistake. We know we would make the same mistake, and that's the fear that others will know too. If others know we are not perfect, we will then be deemed bad, which goes against the human desire to be seen as good. So, we gotta resist the urge to simplify complex issues and shut out emotional responses. There is no perfect or objectively correct way to navigate the world, and your comrades will not always agree with you on end goals and tactics. Disagreement is not inherently divisive. Approach harmful behavior constructively first rather than just dogpiling. If someone is known to preach harmful ideas but seems to agree with your movement on one issue, don't allow the singular right to erase what they've yet to acknowledge or take accountability for. Over the next few weeks, we will revisit these topics to delve deeper into the connections, slowly weaving together the fullest picture that I can offer. It was difficult to stay on topic without veering too far into only one right way or sense of urgency, but that's what makes the untangling and unpacking so difficult. Everything is connected to everything else, and you can rarely untangle just one aspect at a time. Next week, we'll be discussing sense of urgency, quantity over quality, and progress is bigger, more. If you'd like my own journaling prompts, perhaps, you could also brainstorm. My journaling prep was to consider, how do I uphold these? How does the system uphold these? How do we uphold these in movements? And how do we apply the antidotes? And I will see you in the next one. Note, this essay has been modified from its first version posted. To read the original version of this essay, as well as previous and subsequent essays, please refer to the linked Crypt Drive folder. Consider the original formats, the articles before peer review.